So you were convicted of 2 murders. You've been on death row for 10 years.
Yep, that's right.
But why are you still alive?
The death penalty can still be imposed in 27 of the 50 US states, but the process is different than you might think, because a death sentence in the US rarely means that someone will die really soon. It's not uncommon for decades to pass before such a sentence is carried out, but when it does, it's an event that even prison guards are concerned about for many years. In today's video, we want to show you the last 24 hours of 3 prisoners, whose last day couldn't be more different. We begin our video in 2018 in the US state of Nevada, specifically on death row at Ely State Prison in the city of Ely. There, convicted murderer Scott Dozier, who out of greed murdered 2 men in the drug business, was awaiting execution. But Scott Dozier's case is highly unusual, not just because he was initially sentenced to death, but for the circumstances that followed. Because when it was clear that Scott was going to die soon, he actually looked forward to his death because he believed he was righteous. He no longer wanted to go on with his life, and when the first execution date came, there was a shock. Scott was informed that the drug that they wanted to kill him with was not available, so his execution was postponed, first by 2 years, then again by 4 years, and finally by another 5 years. In the meantime, Scott Dozier did everything he could to finally be allowed to die, and even wrote a letter to the district judge asking for his execution to be expedited.
I expectantly and willfully engaged in a life outside of the law. All the families is the conviction, and I would rather be dead than to see.
It wasn't just the agonizing wait that made Scott want to die. He also suffered constant attacks from his fellow inmates in prison and developed an antisocial disorder. He missed his freedom and his daughter, but knew he would never get them back. Eventually, the court granted the death row inmate's wish, and Scott Dozier was ordered to be executed with a cocktail of drugs. This method of execution was so controversial that many media outlets reported on it, and even the governor of Nevada was forced to justify it. But Scott was finally able to begin his last 24 hours, for which he had waited so long. Video footage shows him beaming as he walked down the prison corridor, and he looked relieved.
You're going to be dead in 2 days.
Yeah, I am.
Then a few hours before his death, Scott sat down with a reporter and gave an interview. In the interview, Scott talks in great detail about exactly how he will be put to death and knows a surprising amount about the exact effects of each chemical that will be administered to him. When the reporter asks him about this, Scott says, "It's absolutely wonderful." Scott is then taken to see his family, his ex-wife, and his young daughter. In these final hours, the family is able to say goodbye and spend much more time with Scott than happens during normal prison visits. Scott then receives a final meal from the prison chef, whereas in the past he could eat whatever he wanted. Now he can only choose dishes that can be prepared with ingredients from the prison kitchen, or alternatively a fast food menu from neighborhood restaurants. 2 hours before the execution, Scott Dozier is given powerful sedatives to keep him calm. But just before taking these drugs, Dozier suddenly received shocking news. His execution has been canceled. In the time that followed, Dozier fell into deep grief and eventually committed suicide. Billy Wayne Coble was also on death row for a long time before he finally died. For a very long time. In the video from 2019 that you're watching, the then 70-year-old killer waited for his execution for 30 long years. Billy Wayne Coble murdered his former in-laws and their son in 1989, and despite the many years that passed since then, he has no regrets for his actions, as he revealed in his last interview.
Do you regret what you did?
Was you there? How can you say something if you wasn't there?
In fact, 3 decades after the murders, the Vietnam veteran still believed that he was fully justified in acting so cruelly since his then wife wanted to divorce him. In the last 24 hours of his life, Billy Wayne Coble spent like most men on death row. After many years of waiting, mostly in solitary confinement in a single cell, offenders wake up at 3:30 a.m. for breakfast. They are then given time between 8 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. to receive their final visit and say goodbye to their families. Immediately afterward, they are taken to the execution chamber. Depending on the state, different methods of execution are used in the US. These include death by electric chair, gas chamber, or lethal injection. Around 3:30 p.m., death row inmates are given something to eat for the last time, known as a last meal. While death row inmates are hardly allowed to make their own decisions, they are free to choose this last meal. They record their wishes in writing 3 days before their execution. The only restrictions are that it must be regular food that can be prepared in the prison kitchen and that the meal must not cost more than $40. For many prisoners, the last meal is a real highlight, as this prison chef reveals.
Thanking me for the meal and saying how much he liked it, because he hadn't had food like that 15, 20 years maybe.
Incidentally, by far the most requested last meal in the US is cheeseburgers. After the meal, death row inmates can talk to a priest again, with everything they say recorded in writing. They then wait in a small cell right next to the execution chamber. Meanwhile, the execution room is being prepared for them. Death row inmates are brought into the room only about 5 minutes before the execution. Of course, this is what also happened in the case of Billy Wayne Coble. In the last minutes of his life, he was strapped to a gurney before the doctor administered the lethal injection. His strange last words to his son, his daughter-in-law, and his best friend were,
"That will be $5. I love you, and I love you. Take care."
In general, death row inmates are not alone for whom time on death row is difficult. Just like Billy Wayne Coble, there are usually relatives, children, and friends who, despite the horrible crimes, still see their loved ones inside the criminals and therefore sympathize with them. This was the case with Anthony Haynes, who was due to be executed in 2015 after spending years on death row in Texas for the 1998 murder of a police officer. Shortly before his scheduled execution, Anthony Haynes spoke about the tragedy of his case. According to his testimony, he did not recognize the plainclothes officer as a police officer, and when he reached for his gun, Anthony Haynes mistook him for a criminal who wanted to hurt him, pulled out his gun, and shot him. For this reason, Haynes' family tried for years to prevent his execution in every way possible.
I love Anthony, and we have a spiritual connection. And I'm going to be there for Anthony till the end.
After these moving words from Anthony Haynes' father, just 24 hours before the scheduled execution, the execution was then miraculously halted at the last minute by a Supreme Court decision. Even the court now had doubts about the man's guilt. Even today, however, 9 years after the scheduled execution, Anthony Haynes is still on death row waiting. He does not know if he will ever be released or if he will eventually be executed. If you enjoyed this video about the last 24 hours in the life of a death row inmate, leave us a like and be sure to subscribe. Write us in the comments what is your opinion on the death penalty. Bye and see you next time.